Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Accession, which is episode 16 of season 4 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the 4th season episode Accession. So Accession is the episode in which... Sorry, I don't know why I said that. But it's the episode in which... a Bajoran comes through the wormhole from 200 years in the past, and he claims to be the emissary of the prophets. Sisko, always wanting to distance himself from being a religious figure, relinquishes the title very willingly to this new emissary. However, the new emissary wants to reinstate a caste system which hadn't been used and since prior to the Cardassian occupation, and in doing so really puts back Bajor's progress and makes it unlikely that they will be accepted into the Federation. Moreover, a lot of people have to change jobs or are expected to change jobs, such as Major Kira, who's supposed to be an artist because her Dajara is based on her family name. And this starts to create even more problems when a Vedic kills another Vedic for not giving up his position. And so it's gone far enough for Sisko. So he wants to reclaim the role of emissary, and they're worried that this will cause a divide in perhaps civil war in Bajor. So to resolve the issue, they both go back in the wormhole to talk to the prophets, and the prophets reveal that pretty much, yes, Sisko was the emissary, and he basically sent the other dude into the future in order to teach Sisko. So in other words, they wanted the effect of Sisko realizing that he was the emissary and embracing this role more. So they returned the other dude back to his original time, and Sisko then embraces the role of emissary. So I don't remember exactly what I thought of this episode when I first saw it. I think I thought it was okay. I didn't really have an issue with it. But then sometime like within the past 10 years, I believe, or maybe even 15 years, I'm not sure if it was during my season by reviews that I did in 2018 or if it was before that, but sometime I watched this episode again, after a decade or so, and or several decades, and I hated it. I'm like, oh my god, this episode's terrible. And watching it again, trying to remember why I hated it so much. I don't know. Like, I didn't particularly like it. Like, I have a lot of issues with it, but I wouldn't say that I hate it. Like, I just remember feeling that way after watching that episode, being like, God, this is one of the worst episodes of Deep Space Nine ever. It sucks. But yeah, now watching it now, I'm like, it's not that bad. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but it's not a good episode though. I do still feel that way. So this, I believe, is the first episode that really begins the whole Sisko being a magical being and the prophets, or it's when the wormhole aliens turn into the prophets. Because I notice, like, anyone who's seen the whole show and they go back and they watch earlier episodes like Emissary or Prophet Motive will say, we'll refer to them as the prophets. But I actually think that's incorrect. I think in those two episodes, they were the wormhole aliens. And all the episodes in between, when they were mentioned, they were the wormhole aliens. This is the episode where they become the prophets. Now, that's semantics because they're referred to as either, depending on who's talking about them, like the Federation will say wormhole aliens and the Bajorans will say prophets. But I think from the show's perspective, there were wormhole aliens up until this point, and in this episode they became the prophets. So, let me get a bit more into what I mean by that. But I will say that the episode's Destiny in season 3, which I feel like is one of the most forgettable episodes ever. Like, I keep forgetting it. It's not a bad episode, but I just keep forgetting it exists. And well, anyway, the episodes Destiny and Starship Down lay the groundwork. So they're slowly building up to what this episode does. Because in Starship Down, Kira was like acting like Sisko was some great religious figure, the Emissary, and he's a huge, icon of religious, like active religious figure, and the show's never said that before. Except for Destiny. As I said, Destiny, they kind of lay the groundwork for Kira saying, oh yeah, I do think of you as this religious figure, even though 2.5 seasons have gone by and that's never been the case. Is all of a sudden, oh yes, you're this big emissary figure. And so they were kind of laying the groundwork, but I think this is the episode that really establishes the emissary to be an important, like, political and, like, authoritative, not just a religious icon, like someone who, like, I don't know, just happens to be pious or seen as I can't think of any real life examples, but someone who's just seen as a religious figure but doesn't actively do anything in terms of ruling or teaching the religion, but he goes from being that to being like essentially another pope. Like a huge figure who has authoritative, who can he's basically dictating Bajoran not just law but their entire culture. He just says, hey, I want you to go back to this caste system, and everyone instantly does it. He has the power. And he's talking about how he consulted with Kai Wynn, and I guess her Dajar was okay for her being a religious leader, but not Shakara. It was mentioned that he was expected to become a farmer again. But he consulted this with Kai Wynn, and they agreed that they should do the caste system. What about fucking Shakar? He's actually the first minister, and they're dictating whole Bajoran law. But yeah, I think Bajoran culture has been established in the show to be where the religious faction does contain a lot of political power, and it's almost like the Kai and the First Minister sort of share power. It's almost, I guess, the better analogy, but I'm not that big of a history buff, but I'm sure there are historic situations where the Pope had a lot of political power, and I think I've heard Robert Hewitt Wolfe even say that they based that that's what they based the Bajoran culture off of. But for me, I'd make this sort of analogy to the Prime Minister of the UK compared to the Queen. But the Queen is supposed to control the whole Commonwealth, not just the UK, but still the Queen's more of a figurehead, and the actual day-to-day running of the government is left to the Prime Minister. So I see the relationship being somewhat similar, where the Kai is a figurehead, but the First Minister is the one in charge of running the government and doing the day-to-day monotonous shit. But in this case, the Emissary, with the Kai's blessing, overrode the First Minister. So that's interesting, and more to the point, that's definitely not how they were portraying the Emissary before this episode. Most certainly, definitely not. And maybe it's that retcon aspect, that complete defying continuity, is why I hated this episode so much. I could see that as something because it still bothers me, but I could see that as something that would bother me so much, where I'd be like, this episode is shit. But I don't quite feel that way anymore. But as I said, it still bothers me a lot that this is a clear retcon. However, it's not just the Emissary that they retcon. They also retcon more importantly, the thing about the prophets seeing themselves as Bajoran gods. So back when around the time this first aired, I do remember there used to be there was these not unofficial Star Trek books called The Nitpicker's Guide to Star Trek. They did one for The Next Generation. I think that was the first one, and I read that. I think they did one right after Season 5 aired, so it only had the first 5 seasons, but I think they did an updated version when the show finished with all 7 seasons. I remember buying it when it first came out, and I always refer to The Nitpicker's Guide. And they did one for DS9. And it was after Season 4 aired, so it was only up to Season 4, and I don't believe they ever did a complete version after that. And I don't think they ever did one for Voyager or Enterprise. I think they just stopped there with DS9 doing the first 4 seasons. And I bring it up because I remember reading about this episode, and one of his nitpicks was how he thought it made absolutely no sense for the prophets, which I believe he was referring to as wormhole aliens at the time, because as I said, this is when the shift happens, but that the prophets referred to themselves as being of Bajor. They're like, what? Why would they say this? This makes no sense. And then the prophets further say to Benjamin, they say, you are of Bajor. Now, for those who have seen the entire show, you might think, what's wrong with that? That seems to make perfect sense. I mean, but it does in the context of all the episodes that came after this one. But the ones that came before it does not fit at all. Because they've never... So, and this is something the Nitpicker explained. And I guess this is when I didn't really realize this until I read that Nitpicker's Guide, but what he explained was that the original idea for Emissary, and I might have talked about this when I reviewed Emissary, but the original idea was that there was these aliens that existed outside of linear time and space. So they were very bizarre, very different from anything most humanoid corporeal races have ever seen or could even imagine. And so they were sending these probes to try to make contact with other life forms, which were the orbs. And, they were weird and mystical, and since they outside of time, they could show people the future and the past and stuff like that. And so the Bajorans received these orbs, and so they and I had other contact with these obscure aliens and interpreted them as gods through their perspective. It's like the whole thing that Arthur C. Clarke said, that any alien race that had or any race that had superior technology would be seen as gods to those who were very, very far behind them technologically. And I think that's a really interesting concept. So Sisko makes contact with these aliens, who he deems the wormhole aliens, and can tell that they are just these weird aliens that the Bajorans happen to integrate into their culture as gods. Kind of similar to that Voyager episode Blink of an Eye, where Voyagers integrated into their culture because it was there from their perspective for thousands of years. So something similar to that. So they're aliens whom a culture, integrated into their culture as some sort of gods. But I think the show was very clearly saying that they're not gods. They're just aliens. It's a whole Arthur C. Clarke thing. People a bit more primitive would interpret them as gods, which I do think was Michael Pillar's original vision. And the thing is Michael Pillar is, and honoring, I don't know about Michael Pillar's personal spiritual beliefs. I know that he was into New Age shit, but at the very least, he was honoring Roddenberry's secular vision for Star Trek, because Roddenberry himself was a renowned atheist, and episodes like Who Watches the Watchers make this clear, and that he had more of a humanist approach. I never looked this up, but I do very much get the strong impression that Ira Steven Behr does not agree with that and is more religious. And I do get that feeling. Because, I don't know, I get the impression that, I don't want to get too much in the weeds about the Bajoran religion, but I do get the impression that the original vision that Piller had was that Bajorans were so religious and dependent on the religion because of the atrocities they just encountered with the Cardassian occupation, and so those who suffer through something so terrible tend to rely on religion to get themselves through it. But I think what he was implying is that in order to move on and join the Federation and evolve as a species, that they need to shed these primitive beliefs. And that, of course, is something that Ira Steven Behr absolutely 100% disagrees with. And so I think this is the start. I think as I said, I think the seeds were laid back in season 3, which is when Ira Steven Behr first took over. But I think this is the first episode that really hammers it home that no, religion is not something that you need to shed. It's not a primitive belief. It's integral to a society, and it's a good, positive thing, and they need to embrace their religion. Furthermore, the wormhole aliens aren't weird aliens that the Bajorans misinterpret as gods. They are gods. So this is why I say, if you should make it more clear, this is why I say this is the turning point of when they change from wormhole aliens to prophets. Because wormhole aliens, they're aliens that just so happen to be misinterpreted as God. Prophets, they are gods. So this is the episode where they become gods. And the whole thing with, if you've seen that documentary, the what we leave behind, or what we left behind, the mythical season 8, which I thought was fucking terrible, that the writers, led by Ira Steven Behr, come up with for that documentary, involve the Bajorans eventually turning Deep Space Nine into a temple, and it's run by the religion, and Kira is a Vedic now, and they're all super religion, and it involves an evil plot by Section 31, who's now being led by Julian Bashir, to try to erase their religion, I can't remember the exact shit because it's bullshit, but they try to use this Federation conspiracy to try to destroy their religion in order to conquer them so they'll join the Federation. And that's mainly why I hate it. That's such a stupid thing, and moreover, it completely misunderstands Star Trek and what Star Trek is all about. And I do believe that as much as I hate Rick Berman and give him tons of shit for destroying a lot of Star Trek, which I'm not taking back, especially Endgame and the bullshit they did with Voyager, as much as I don't like Rick Berman, I do think Rick Berman was holding Ira Steven Behr back, and other producers in the studio were holding him back from doing stupid bullshit like that. And so when they did that documentary, there was no one there holding them back. And I see that mythical season 8 as a first draft, because typically when they throw out ideas like that, but then they would get bandied around, and the studio would come in, someone smart would be like, no, that's a dumb idea, don't do that, what if you change it to something that's not fucking dumb? But it just goes to show Ira Steven Behr's different attitude. How, during that same documentary, congratulated his writing staff for making sure that Bajor didn't join the Federation. That will never cease to puzzle the fuck out of me. Like, why? Like, that's the whole point of the show. They reiterate that in this episode that was Sisko's goal. And why wouldn't they want to join the Federation? And I guess I'll talk about this more when I get to For the Cause, when Eddington makes that speech about the Federation being like the Borg. But I think Ira Steven Behr actually believes that. I think he's anti-Federation, which, as much as I do like him, as much as I love Deep Space Nine, as you know, Deep Space Nine is my favorite show, but someone who's anti-Federation has no business being in charge of a show. And as I said, he still did a great job, and I still love the show, but it does make me wonder if the show would have been better off in the hands of someone who actually understood Roddenberry's vision and actually agreed with the Federation like I do. 100% I think the Federation is not evil. I think they are... The whole point of it is to be the ideal society for humanity, and so Bajor joining that would be a very good thing. And so this is kind of why I think that the novels that take place, I keep talking about them because I do like them, that came out and took place after Deep Space Nine finished, that showed Bajor joining the Federation. To me, that's way closer to canon than that bullshit that they did in the Mythical Season 8 about, they all turned into monks or Vedics, and the evil atheist Federation tries to destroy them. What the fuck is that? That is so... Not only is that bullshit, it betrays your uniform. I mean, it betrays the whole original concept that Pillar came up with, which I actually love. Now, getting back to this episode, that's why the nitpicker has such a huge issue with this episode, because it's like, he's like, what the fuck does that mean Sisko is of Bajor? And how come the Wormhole Aliens are saying they're Bajor? They're meant to be this metaphor for, the Arthur C. Clarke metaphors of superior technology being misinterpreted as gods. And as we'll see in later seasons, that Ira Steven Behr and the show pushes this further and further and further. And in fact, and I mentioned this several times because it's important, Ira Steven Behr even said in an interview that his goal became turning Sisko into a god. And so he embraced that whole emissary thing as being more than just a religious icon and made him into an active political religious figure. And so he kept pushing that. And then, of course, the whole storyline, Season 7, where he actually was a prophet. It's just, you can see his obsession of, I want to turn Sisko into a god, and he wanted to make and he turned the prophets, rather than being these aliens that exist outside of time. That whole exist outside of time thing starts making less and less sense, by the way, the more they push this, them being gods storyline. And particularly when you get to the whole Sisko being a prophet thing, but I'll get there eventually. Jesus Christ. But and I do love Deep Space Nine, despite these things, not because of them. But they started making the prophet, and then they invented the Pal race so that there could be the evil demons. So they try to turn it into, take it from the whole classic sci-fi Arthur C. Clarke, or just weird technology and how primitive people can misconstrue that. Take it from that to, there's a fight between good and evil, and Sisko is on the side of good, and he's a god and fighting the evil gods. Like, it gets into too much of a simplistic fantasy realm, and I liked what Michael Pillar was doing way better. But as I said, I still like the show despite this bullshit that they did. But point is, this is where it begins. This is completely 100% where it begins. It's the whole emissary thing, as I said, the groundwork was being laid in Destiny and Starship Down, but the whole prophets being gods, this is where it starts. Like, they were just aliens that were misinterpreted as God before this episode. After this episode, they are gods. And that they considered Sisko to be his emissary. Like, so, if they exist outside of time, and there's no such thing as linear time, when they first met Sisko in the episode Emissary, they should have been like, oh, it's the Sisko. They should know him already. But, yeah, that non-linear thing, as I said, it stops making sense when this episode goes, and they tried to keep it up and even throw in lines like in What You Leave Behind when Sisko's with the prophets and he says, it's not linear. They try to tie it back to Emissary, but it actually doesn't fucking make any sense. But, anyway, anyway. So, what I liked about this episode, and why I didn't think it was that terrible, was it does make a difference watching it in context, because I kind of miss some of the Bajoran storylines. I talked about this in the episode Crossfire, another episode that was not good. And it's interesting that they're getting back to the Bajoran storylines, because this is a Bajoran station after all, and there's still half the team that works there or Bajoran officers. So I think they do need to touch back on Bajoran focused episodes every once in a while. So, and I do like how they handled this one. Even though they retconned Sisko's role as emissary, I did find it interesting that he was having to, bless people's weddings and shit like that, and how, even if an icon, that does make kind of sense, but the fact they'd be able to change the entire society. And Kira even says, like, when Sisko says, like, he says something along the lines of, I can't believe he has, everyone's listening to him just because the emissary. And Kira is saying, oh, well, we would have listened to you as the emissary if you exercised that power. Oh, really, Kira? What about the fucking circle? if people would have listened to Sisko as the emissary, then how come when the circle came, all Sisko had to be is like, the emissary thinks this is a bad idea? Even if Sisko refused to evoke the emissary because he's not comfortable doing that, they know he's the emissary. And so if he says, I command, don't do this, don't do the Civil War, then how come at least enough people didn't listen to him and be like, no, you're going against the will of the prophets by trying to get rid of the emissary? I don't know. I think they did pay lip service to this in the Circle trilogy, if I remember correctly, saying that some people... Oh, no, what it was, I'm thinking of In the Hands of the Prophets, when Vedic Boral's talking to Sisko in the garden, and he's saying that, some people feared you as the emissary that walked with the prophets, and some people fear you because Vedic Wind told them to, whatever. But if they fear him, they shouldn't fear him if they worship him as the emissary, and they were going to obey whatever he's going to say, like Kira said in this episode. Then why did they fucking try to overthrow him in a rebellion? It's not consistent. It is a retcon. It is not consistent at all. But anyway, and so when Kira said that line, I'm like, bullshit, Kira. Bullshit. What about, Minister Jaro would disagree with you. But anyway. Anyway. The other thing I liked was, other than getting back to the Bajoran stuff, was getting back to Kira and Sisko's relationship. I love and this is kind of continuing off of Starship Down, which, even though they were both incredibly out of character in that episode, because acting like they, never talk to each other in social settings, which they do all the time, but it's still, I like the interactions between the two of them in this episode, particularly the scene where Kira says that she's resigning, and Sisko's like, I can find someone to fill your post, but I could never replace you. That was a powerful line, and I think both actors, and to Avery Brooks's credit, both actors played that well. And it was a very touching scene, and you felt like the chemistry, like platonic, don't get me wrong, but the friendship between these two characters and the chemistry between them. And I appreciate that when I get it, because I feel like we don't get as much like Kira Cisco combo as like Riker Picard or whatever, that we need to get the captain first officer thing more often. So I appreciate it when we get it. And Worf is not the first officer. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. I think the actor who played I can't remember his name, the poet dude who was the emissary, the Fa emissary, he was good. The actor who played him, I thought it was a good performance. I think he sold it. I think it's an interesting concept too of famous poet from 200 years in the past coming to the present. I think they could have done more with that concept, but they were too preoccupied with dealing with this emissary bullshit. And it's obvious that the point of the episode was to get Cisco to accept his role of emissary, and I think that storyline was a bit clunky. It was a bit clunky. And of course, and I mentioned this before in other videos, the whole thing with the Vedic killing another Vedic because his Dajar was unpure and he refused to leave the order. That's fucking stupid. I mean, come on. Like, even if he disagreed with him, he wouldn't he killed him and he thought nothing was wrong with it. Like, oh yeah, of course, duh, I killed him. And when Odo arrested him, he was like, what? You're arresting me for that? Like, what? Just because the emissary says we should go back to the Jars, is it okay to kill people because of the Jars? And he thinks, oh, obviously. Like, what the hell, man? But anyway. Yeah, that was total bullshit. That was so dumb. That was way over the top. But getting back into sort of the religious argument, there's that scene with Kira and Odo when, I believe it's when the dude first announced they were going back to the Jaras, or maybe it was before. No, it was before, because Odo was arguing with Kira about the fact that she's accepting this new dude as emissary, but it's like, does that mean you were wrong about Cisco? That he wasn't the emissary? And Kira's like, no, not really. It just means that he's the emissary. And Odo's like, well, this doesn't make any sense to me. And Kira's like, that's the thing about religion, that if you don't have it, it doesn't make any sense. And if you do have it, no explanation is necessary. So, sorry to put on my atheist hat now, but I guess it depends on your own personal beliefs or how you interpret that scene. Maybe if you have a strong sense of faith, the religious faith, that you would agree with what Kira said. But from my perspective, that's just a typical BS circular logic that religions tend to make. They tend to have this, well, this is, things that Odo clearly called her in a contradiction, in a logical inconsistency. And like most religious people, when they're caught in a blatant inconsistency or logical inconsistency, they just say, oh, faith. It's circular. If you have the faith, then it makes sense. Like, that's not a real answer. But anyway, that's, again, take my atheist hat off now. But something I noticed while I was watching that. Again, like maybe someone who does have faith would interpret that scene differently. Probably, definitely, because I was my view is a bit cynical, more cynical towards religions, which is why I agree with Michael Piller a lot more than Ira Stephen Bear. But who's respecting Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek, but let's move on. from that, and one last thing I want to mention about this storyline is I did notice the nice little Easter egg when Kira was meeting with Cisco, and Kira saying, "Oh, the shift to the 4-shift rotation is seeming to be working very well," and Cisco says, "Oh, make it permanent then." Never noticed that tiny little details because in Starship Down, that's when Kira suggested. I don't remember if I mentioned this in my review for it, but that's when Kira suggested that they shift from 3 shifts to 4 shifts. And it was like when Cisco was dying. And then at the end of the episode, Cisco brings it up again like it's his idea, and that's supposed to be funny. It's like, you just stole her idea. But anyway, but now they're saying that it makes sense. And that's actually the proper way to do it, not the way Jellicoe does it by just going on board a new ship and new crew and being like, I don't give a fuck what you think. Change it to a 4-shift rotation. Get it done. Such a terrible captain. But anyways, that is another topic entirely. So let's get into the B plot with O'Brien and Keiko. I don't understand this storyline. Like the whole... I like O'Brien and Bashir as a bromance. I talked about this in other things too. Like I'm very pro LGBTQIA, and if they have gay couples on screen like they did in Discovery, I think it's a very good thing. But at the same time, I have a thing against people not being okay with 2 men having a very close but plutonic relationship. It seems... I know there's some in the LGBT community that do it in a good faith faction because they want to be represented more. But I also deem it as a negative view of masculinity that men are not allowed to be very close to each other or have like plutonic love for each other, and if they do, it's like, you're gay. That's looking at it from more of a homophobic perspective, being like, oh, you can't be all lovey-dovey toward another man, that must mean you're gay. And I guess that's more of a cynical view that I have, and that's why I'm against all the talk about O'Brien and Bashir being gay lovers, and because I think it's very clear that's not the intention. Like the thing with Garrick and Bashir, that was the intention, at least of the actor who played Garrick, so I'm more okay with that. Well, not that Bashir reciprocated it, but certainly that Garrick felt that way, so that's fine. Although I wouldn't say that they're a couple, but like showing them as a couple in the parallel universe like they did in Lower Decks, I thought was great. But with Bashir and O'Brien, very clearly they're saying that they have a strong plutonic relationship, and I think men should be allowed to have strong plutonic relationships without everyone, going, you're gay, even if they do it from a good faith perspective. Like, men should be comfortable being close to one another. And I feel that's the same way about Sam and Frodo, about Kirk and Spock, and maybe several other relationships I'm not thinking of right now. But anyway, so in other words, I don't agree with the people that say that this storyline shows that O'Brien really is in love with Bashir. I think it's very clear that's not what they're going for. But I can see why a lot of people are confused, because I don't really agree with what they are going for, and maybe some of the writers actually feel this way in their real lives, but they touch on this several more times throughout Deep Space Nine, that O'Brien actually feels more comfortable around Bashir, and sometimes even wants to spend more time with him. And that's something that I just can't relate to this episode at all, the storyline. Apparently other people felt this way, saying it's looking at it from the perspective of like a honeymooner's old ball and chain. Oh, don't like being around the old ball and chain. I'd rather go out with the guys and drink beers. Which I suppose there are a lot of people who are like that. I'd never been like that. When I was married for 13 years, I considered my wife my best friend. And in fact, like, I feel like if I'm ever in a long-term committed relationship, I feel like I have to look at my partner as my best friend, which might explain why I got friend zoned a lot, because a lot of people saw me as a friend when I was like, no, I see you as romantic, because being a good friend is a part of that. But maybe that's just my messed up perspective. But either way, I can't relate to this at all. I had good close friends before, that was strictly platonic, and I obviously still do. And some even being women and some men. So it's not like I had never had the strong, close platonic relationship without it being romantic. I certainly have. But I don't understand of wanting to spend more time and would prefer to be around your platonic friend rather than your partner, because I would also consider my partner to be my best friend. Now, granted, maybe that's why our marriage didn't last and we got a bit sick of each other because we spent too much time together, but that's another topic entirely. But I still, and I think the way that this storyline was presented, like, every time I noticed this in this last rewatch, every time they went back to the storyline, I was like, oh shit, I really slumped. Like, I actively noticed that I was way more interested in the main plot, even though I have tons of issues with it. I was still more interested in it than this storyline, because it just seemed dumb and boring, and they were just hitting the same beat over and over again. Oh, look, O'Brien's sad that he's not hanging out with Bashir, and eventually Keiko does the thing where she's like, oh, O'Brien, Bashir's really depressed, you should hang out with them, and then calls Bashir, is like, O'Brien's really depressed, you should hang out. Yeah, that was supposed to be goofy and fun or whatever. I just thought it was dumb. I just didn't like the storyline. I did like Bashir playing darts with Morn, though. Anytime they can slip Morn in there, and they were talking about him going to holosuites with Morn doing the World War II fighter plane. I wanted to see that, but anyway, but we never actually see Bashir O'Brien. So they mention these holosuite programs they have all the time. We never actually see them because of the money, the quiche. But anyway, so this is also the episode where they reveal Keiko is pregnant. I'm not sure why they did this. I don't know. I guess they wanted to be the driver of, Brian being a bit sad that he wanted to, have more intimate time with Keiko. But it doesn't really seem necessary. Like, it seems to come out of nowhere. And of course, and we'll get to this when we get to the episode body parts, but later, because very clearly they hadn't decided to put the baby in Kira. That happens later, because later they found out Nana Visitor's pregnant, and they're like, one of the options is for her to wear baggy clothes and hide it, and just shoot her from, the shoulders up. I think they did that with Dr. Crusher for a season when Gates McFadden got pregnant. So it's doable, but it's harder. So I think, and especially for Kira, who's very action orientated in The First Officer, so I think they were like, oh, but we already, established that Keiko is present. I wish that, we could just put that baby from Keiko and put it in Kira. And they're like, hey, this is science fiction. We can do whatever the fuck we want. So that's exactly what they did. But anyway, I'll talk about that more when you get the body parts. But the point is that they hadn't established that at this point. They hadn't thought of that yet at this stage, very clearly. It just so happened to be a happy coincidence that I already established someone's pregnant, so they just had to switch it to someone else. But yeah, I just don't see I don't see why. I don't see what it adds to anything. Maybe they're just like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if O'Brien had 2 kids? I don't know. Could have just been as simple as that. Or maybe they thought it would be the catalyst for this dumbass storyline. I don't know. Anyway, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters very much for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. I want to give a big special thanks to Jordan Johnson and Brandon Nealhouse. Thank you both so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Miguelasio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we do have a few Patreon comments for this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091 that says, Accession, more like it's shit, son. Mark, we're in a similar predicament. I vaguely remember this episode, but I don't remember it well enough to know if I like it or not. Because you are never wrong when it comes to Star Trek issues. I'm once again leaning on you to tell me whether or not I like this episode. I remember it having something to do with some old Bajoran guy who disappeared or something. That alone makes me think I probably didn't like it, but I could be mistaken. I need you to settle this for me once and for all. Do I like this episode, or is it shit, son? Hashtag booty crap. So, clearly this episode is shit, son. You hate this episode. You think it sucks because when O'Brien and Bashir go into holosuites, they're not going to Vic's. And Vic isn't in this episode, so clearly you hate it. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, okay, this is the episode that seems to make the prophets at an alien race more like gods going forward. That seems to be the depiction I suspect to Ira Steven Bear's delight. There are some things I like, such as one of the prophets visiting Cisco as Kaiopaka, and that the false emissary, the renowned Bajoran poet, would encourage the Bajorans to go backwards caste system where who they are and what they do is already determined. Some good stuff, interesting challenges, including Starfleet's relations with the Bajoran community. It's too bad Kai Wynn is only referred and seems to have the blessing, because of course she would, of Lan's, I believe his name, Lan's backward arrangements of the Dajara. The problem is when everything resolves itself and appears others like Kira have the memory that Lan visited them, why would Kai Wen agree the Dazars should no longer be continued? I mean, yeah, Shakar might, but there's still the prominence of the religious system in Bajor, so that is a major plot hole. And yes, of course, the prophets seem to be established as gods, and Sisko's more acceptance of the emissary seems way more than a title, maybe not a messiah, but something seriously spiritual, which would be responsible for Bear's ultimate twist in the beginning of Season 7, and what I call the third worst retcon, although I'm really harsh on Kira's mother affair with Dukat Revelation, and I'll discuss that when we get to it. And then that religious leader killing someone for not adhering to his Dajaras seemed to be so over the top. It may have been more effective, maybe excommunicated and banished from the planet, I'd argue. I'll give it 6.5 more times I wish someone at least representing Kaiopaka to appear out of 10. I did like the Kaiopaka appearance. I like how they mentioned it earlier with, Emissary dude being like, yo, your paw is strong, and saying, I see why Opaka thought you were the Emissary. And so after saying that, we actually see Opaka, and the vision made sense too of her saying, who are you? Because it's prophets are trying to tell him something. I think they maybe reinforced this too much with Bashir saying, oh, usually the vision is trying to, Bajorans believe it's when you ignore an orb experience of what they're trying to tell you. I didn't think that it worked. I don't really buy the caste system either. I don't buy that it wasn't until the occupation that they got rid of it, because it seems really backwards, and it seems like I feel like the Bajorans were portrayed as like much more enlightened or prosperous before that, but even before the occupation. And it was the occupation that set them back, not the other way around. So, I don't know. It was necessary for the plot, so the plot can happen. Very obviously. And as for the plot hole about Kai Wynn not immediately going back to not using the Dajars, it's so the episode can happen. I think it's dumb that they went so quickly to the Dajars in the first place. The fact that they go back just as quickly, I think, tracks. If they're going to go to it so quickly, they're going to be that fickle where they immediately change their whole society, then why not be just immediately changed back? I don't know. I just think they never should have went to it so quickly in the first place. But again, so the episode can happen. is basically the gist of it. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, this is a great social commentary about caste systems and how inhumane and obsolete they are. Concerning the Wormhole Aliens, TNG was rather anti-religious, but DS9 is getting more and more pro-religious. With this episode, the Wormhole Aliens entirely get retconned to be the prophets, and the title of the Emissary gets the importance that it will have for the rest of the series. Mark, do you like these changes, or should it have stayed the way it was in the first season? Should have Star Trek continued to treat religion like TNG episode Who Watches the Watchers did? It was nice to see Keiko again, but besides that, the plot was too trivial. Also, it was great to see Opaka again, but I found it strange that Wynn wasn't featured in this story. My rating is 7 out of 10. Well, Louise Fletcher is, not important, but she's a good actress. She's not someone you just have on a whim. You're only going to bring her in if she's at least somewhat important to the plot. And I feel like you couldn't have her in the episode other than a quick cameo, and they're not going to get her for just a quick cameo. And plus, you don't need to see her. Them just saying, oh, Kai Wynn has my blessing, that's all you really need. I don't think she was needed to actually see her, but that's just my humble opinion. I don't know if I'd call this good commentary. Yes, caste systems are terrible, but I just think the way that they presented them in this episode was, as I said, a bit McClunky. Anyway, as for the question, do I prefer? I think I might have already answered that in this video, and that is yes. I would prefer that they present religion in the same way TNG did, such a la Who Watches the Watchers, but again, that's maybe my personal bias, since I'm more of an agnostic or atheist than I am actively religion. And I think that, and a humanist, just like Roddenberry was. And as I said, I'm more in line with Roddenberry's vision, and clearly Ira Steven Behr was. I suspect some of the other writers, like Ronald D. Moore, also were more religious and agree more with this, but just my humble. It doesn't really portray religion in that positive light, where that Vedic dude was willing to just kill the other guy for no good reason, but I think that's just bad writing. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, This was an okay episode. As I don't have time to watch these episodes from Deep Space Nine, especially Star Trek, I don't care about canon Voyager, so my rating is 6. Could you say this fake emissary is on the right side of the circle history? I hope you understand this cryptic comment here out of 10. I do not understand the cryptic comment unless you're referring to the episode The Circle. And is he on the right side of them? Would he be teaming up with the Circle? Maybe. But if the emissary is so important, the Circle should have never had enough power to overthrow Benjamin or try to kick him out of the station in the first place. But I don't think that's what you were getting at. Anyway, next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, Mark, I think we might disagree on this episode, one of the rare times, but I really like it, especially for Sisko's arc. I like how it is initially revealed, relieved to, I like how he initially was relieved to distance himself from the emissary role, but then realizes that he is needed to do what is best for Bajor. I also like Kira's story here, that again she puts her faith over to what she personally wants. I do understand that Vedic murdering the man is over the top, unnecessary, but overall I do like this episode and the direction it went in for the Prophets and Emissary. I think, could be wrong, this is the episode where the Prophets say we are of Bajor, which becomes an important part of Sisko's plea for help for them in Sacrifice of Angels. You are correct. It is when the Prophets first say we are of Bajor, and it indicates the whole trajectory that their storyline will go through. And as I said, that's when they retcon them from being wormhole aliens and they are now Prophets. Yeah, Sisko's arc was good. As I said, I did kind of like how he did go from being reluctant to actually being more accepting. But as I said, once again, McClunky! It was very clunky storyline. That's a reference to Star Wars, if you don't get it. Or like one of the newer editions. But anyway, I still don't understand. I just had the Greedo say McClunky for no reason. Like, I don't get that. That's the only thing they changed about it when it went to Disney Plus. But anyway, sorry. So, next comment is from, like, that was such a contested scene, too, because it was who shot first, Han or Greedo, and then Lucas changes to Greedo shot first, and everyone revolted, and it was like, you ruined my childhood because of this. And then, like, they're like, you should change it back, but instead, they should have seen the same way. They just have Greedo say, McClunky. Like, what? Was he just doing that to troll people? Anyway, sorry, this is not about Star Wars. Next comment is from Ricky, who says, this episode was really good. It was nice to see that the episode confirms that Sisko was the chosen one and how this would be important for the show going forward. And it was a reality check for Sisko of how important it was that he accepted and acknowledged his role from the Prophets. And it shows how this Bajoran so-called emissary did so much damage and affected Bajor in the bad way, and that it had to be that Sisko needed to be the chosen one. So yeah, good episode, so my rating is a 7 out of 10. Well, more important than, because Benjamin Mead was like, it was one of the rare occasions we disagree. I don't know if it's that rare. It's definitely more rare for me to disagree with Ricky, which I do about this one. That's more rare. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Fa emissary really affected Bajor that much at all, because they were able to like immediately undo everything with a magic hand wipe at the end of the episode. Yeah, now the whole thing with the Kira, like, reading the poem and saying, oh my god, there's a whole nother verse that wasn't there before, he must have wrote it when he got back, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense, but they try to call out their own bullshit, and Carrie even mentions, like, well, if the timeline has changed, why do I remember the original form? And Sisko says the prophets work in mysterious ways, which I think is the episode's way of saying that the prophets fucked around, did some fuckery with the timeline to make it so people would still remember the alternate timeline. Also, I wonder if they would like change the entire timeline, because that guy was not supposed to go back to Bajor. Maybe by sending him back, wouldn't you do a butterfly effect that could alter the whole history of Bajor? But apparently the only thing that was altered was that one line. Or that's the only thing Kira remembers. Maybe the prophets erased all the other changes that happened. But anyway, maybe there was like a whole other Bajoran first officer in the station, and by getting rid of him or having him come back, that person never existed, and Kira took over the role. It's just no one remembers because the prophets wiped that night. Anyway, I'm getting ridiculous. Next comment is from Brandon Neal Howes, who says, "Sorry, but the Bajoran religion is boring. How convenient that this poet appears just when Sisko's having doubts about his place as the emissary, and the poet decides to reintroduce a caste system that has never been mentioned before, even not during the Cardassian occupation. Caste systems are an abomination, in my opinion. I find the Vedic Porta murdering the other bloke because he was unclean a reprehensible act. Both Shakar and Kai Wynn are mentioned, but I feel like the story would have carried more weight if they had appeared, if only on a communication screen. It seems a really cheap cop-out to take a Quorum, I think a Quorum is his name. To take a Quorum to meet the prophets, we all know he will not return. Meanwhile, Keiko and Molly return from whatever botanic expedition they have been on, and Keiko is pregnant, which puts a damper on the O'Brien-Bashir bromance. Sigh. I really don't like discussing Miles and Keiko because they have no chemistry whatsoever. 6 Quark says, see Brock acquire. Acquire, Brock, acquire! Out of 10. Well, you and I disagree about Keiko and Miles. I think we talked about this before. I do like their chemistry in this episode. And I think there are some episodes where they don't have chemistry, but it's funny when this B plot first started, when I was rewatching it today, I couldn't remember if this was the one where like Miles and Keiko were like pissy at each other, and Miles is being all jealous about the fact that she's staying on this expedition longer. But I remember, like, I already saw that episode. That was like that stupid Fascination episode. So which one is this? And I was like, oh, it's the one where he's sad because he doesn't get to hang out with Bashir. I was like, that's almost worse. Yeah, because I think I actually quite liked that other one in Fascination. Like, that was the only good thing about that episode, where this one is definitely worse. So here's the thing about Quorum, I believe his name is, the faux emissary, Fa emissary. They went to the wormhole together, and Sisko comes back, and he's like, he makes a speech apparently where he's like, oh, you know, that other guy, we went off on a trip together, and he left to be with the prophets. Hey, he's just gone to the prophets. The prophets took him back to his time. He's gone now. Don't worry about it. I feel like a lot of people would find that very suspicious. Would a lot of people be like, oh, he's gone off to live on a farm and be all happy now? It just so happened that the two of us were in a dispute over this position of power. We went off on the trip together, and I'm the only one that came back because the prophets took him away. Like, I don't know. I feel like, to me, that's the bigger plot hole than the one Norman mentioned about how they instantly went back to the caste system. Like, or away from the caste system. They instantly went back to the normal system. But to me, that's the bigger issue is, like, wouldn't there be some people who wouldn't buy what Cisco's saying? Like, it seems very suspicious. Like, I think I watched a review where they were saying that they would have made more sense if the prophets just erased everyone's memory of Fa Emissary being there. Like, that certainly would have resolved Norman's complaint as well about how they instantly went back from the caste system. So that actually would have fixed a lot of things if they just did it that way. But I think they wanted the main characters to remember. But they could have been like Cisco and Kira's the only ones who remember, but then that would make no sense, and they'd have to address that. How come only the main characters remember that? So maybe this is just easier to do it that way, so maybe it would create more problems than it solves. Or maybe not. Maybe they could just not have any of the characters except for Cisco remember. I don't see anything wrong with that. But anywho, I digress. Yeah, again, Shakar, and I think especially Louise Fletcher's too important of an actor for them to just have on the screen. Maybe they could do the old Ghost Candle. What's his face? Who plays Shakar. But they never do, so maybe he was too important to get for a brief scene. As I said, I don't actually think it would add anything to show them. I think we're fine not seeing them, but that is just me. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Accession out of 10 is going to be a 4 poor. Now, I do believe this is an upgrade for me, because I think I had given this episode a 2 in the past, and it was like in the running for like top 20 worst episodes. So my opinion of it has improved, but I still don't like it. Like, first of all, that B plot was dumb and nonsense and a waste of time, and the A plot, as I said, like, I enjoy some things about it. I enjoy the character interactions between Kira and Cisco. I like the Cisco character story of him being more comfortable in his role. And, I like getting back to a Bajoran focus episode. I think we do need to have those every season, and it's good to see. But there's just too much nonsense. This is when they first retconned the prophets to be gods, and as I said, I don't care for that retcon. And this is, more importantly, like, the whole thing about the caste system doesn't make any sense, and they also retcon the role of the emissary. That doesn't make any sense. And they have the dude, like, the Vedic killing another dude for no reason. It was goofy and dumb and silly, and they just instantly go to the caste system just because the emissaries say so, and then they instantly go back from him. It's just, as I said multiple times, it was McClunky. It was a very clunky, poorly written storyline. So 4 out of 10 for me. Anyway, that is it for my review of Accession. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think of this episode, subscribe. That sort of thing helps me out a lot. And if you would like to leave a comment for me to read on my videos, a short comment, like 50 words or less, you could go to my Facebook page or my Blue Sky page. Links to both of those in the description below. And for anyone who wants to, you can leave a comment, a short comment that I'll read in my videos. But if you want to leave a longer comment, you could consider supporting me on Patreon, where Patreon supporters can leave much longer comments like the ones I just read. And also you get other goodies such as pre-releases, access to Patreon-only series of videos I do where I revisit reviews that I've already done, and, a few other things thrown in there you can check out if you're so inclined to do so. So let's see what's coming up next on the old channel here. Okay, Thursday will be my review for the Voyager episode Life Signs. Next Monday will be my review for the Voyager episodes Investigations. And then the following Thursday will be my revisited over on Patreon revisiting my review of the Voyager episode Deadlock, one of the best Voyager episodes. So you can check that out on Patreon if you're a supporter there. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.